So this session is actually sponsored by Conscious Capitalism. So I do want to thank them and all of our sponsors to make this possible today. I am Mel Hubner. I'm located in North Carolina. I work with Southern Energy Management and 360 Rocks. Can you guys hear me? I thought it was a little glitchy. Okay. And 360 Rocks, we work with purpose-driven organizations across the country to help those organizations have more sustainable strategy and operations. Thank you really again for being patient with us today. And thank you to all these amazing speakers that you can see here for being here today and agreeing to speak on this panel. So that brings to my next point. This is not a traditional panel. We will allow our speakers to share their story and their presentation one at a time, having some time for questions after that. So if you have any questions, make sure to add it to the Q&A box. And after our presenter shares their story, we'll get to those questions. For the sake of time, I think I'm gonna skip some introductions so you can just talk a little bit about yourself in the beginning. But I do want to kick this off saying that these are amazing. We have 5 amazing leaders here that are really leading the change within their organization as well as in their industry. They're setting an example to all of us, really. And when I first heard their stories, I was so inspired. And so I do hope that all of you feel as inspired as I felt. And so we had the video for Conscious Capitalism to get started in the beginning, but I think we're just going to skip that for now and just go straight to Fenwick, Broyard, and Isaiah Smith. Thank you so much for being here. And there we go. You guys can take the stage.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, right. I know. Well, thank you all so much for creating an opportunity for us to get to speak into this amazing panel. I'm looking forward to hearing from the other presenters who unfortunately will not be joining us on the stage, in the sense that, right, this isn't a traditional panel where all of us will be speaking and sort of playing off of each other. It sounds like we're kind of breaking this down into segments. And so Isaiah and I are going to be speaking from the perspective of the craft brew industry and some of the efforts that are underway in our industry to try to achieve the JEDI goals as we see them playing out inside of our specific industry, of our specific companies. I am the Vice President of Talent and Culture for Creature Comforts Brewery out here in Athens, Georgia. A role at Creature Comforts for, at this point, I guess, probably just about 4 months. Just started in this position, but I'm really excited about the work that we are doing, some of the very intentional steps that we are taking towards addressing the lack of diversity inside of our company, but then also recognizing that we've got a responsibility to leverage our position in the craft industry to try to support some of the work that's being done by some of the great actors in our community who are pursuing the goal of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice inside of our space. So I'll stop there just by way of introduction, I suppose. I mean, maybe I'll start, maybe I'll add to that just kind of what brought me to the work, because I think that's one of the other questions that we were supposed to speak into. My background is actually in nonprofit management, nonprofit development. I spent many years working in the nonprofit sector, providing technical assistance, strategic planning support, working with a whole host of nonprofit organizations in Athens, Georgia, and actually worked with Creature Comforts at the time. The CEO of Creature Comforts ended up serving on the board of the nonprofit that I was running, and we were sort of tapped and asked to support Creature Comforts in the generation and creation of their corporate responsibility program, which is the Get Comfortable program. So that program's been underway for about 4 or 5 years. We had a hand, myself and some of my staff had a hand in bringing that program into existence. Really proud of that work. And then, of course, once the opportunity presented itself to join the Creature Comforts family, I left at it because I was thoroughly impressed by what I saw Creature doing and becoming. I guess in many ways, I like I said, primarily my background was in the nonprofit space. And so the idea of purpose-driven work was kind of like woven into my expectations around what I would be doing with the rest of my life. And Creature was really the first company that I encountered that sort of modeled and embodied that sense of business as a force for good. And I mean, this was long before Creature Comforts even started pursuing B Corp certification, but from my perspective, I think Creature was my first encounter with a business that was designed to accomplish some of the same objectives that have been codified in the B Corp framework, and it makes perfect sense to me that we're well on our way to securing that certification. But I mean, ultimately, I honestly didn't figure that I would ever at any point in my life make the transition from the nonprofit to the for-profit sector. And it was all discovered this idea of business as a force for good, as I said, like sort of exemplified in the example of Creature Comfort, that I was even willing to take that step and to move over onto this side of the for-profit nonprofit divide. So that's a little bit about kind of how I got here, and I'll pass it over to Isaiah to give a little bit of his backstory as well before we get into the details of what we're here to talk about.
For sure. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Isaiah Smith. I am the CEO and co-founder of Our Culture Brewing Company, a brewery and planning based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm also the president of Leaders of the Brew School, a minority-owned co-op in development. So in terms of my background, I'm a 10-year supply chain professional. I've had the opportunity to work for many Fortune 500 companies, solving all types of complex problems around infrastructure, synergy, and sustainability. And over the last 2 years, I decided to try my hand at entrepreneurship. And that's kind of how I got into co-founding Our Culture Brewing Company. What drove me to the work was, I've had this intense passion for the art that is craft beer. And I wanted to take my professional skill set, around optimizing businesses and solving all these complex problems and apply it to something that I was passionate about. So in doing that, entering into the industry, from my perspective, I encountered a couple of opportunities, which we'll discuss today, centered around diversity and inclusion and equity and things of that nature. So, really wanted to figure out how I could do what I've always done in my professional life, which is, solve those problems. So in terms of some of the barriers to entry that we think about when we talk about craft beer, just like as an entrepreneur, it's prohibitively expensive to start up. And there's a relatively long incubation time required from a licensing perspective. So, to give you guys a little bit of context, it could be anywhere from like 6 to 18 months before you get all the necessary licensing required to stand up your business. So, it's difficult to sit on, all of that investment and not be licensed until you even have the opportunity to sell to the public. So, funding has always been an issue in my community and other minority communities like it. So, when we think about some of the challenges around that long incubation period, that funding challenge is exacerbated. So I think about a couple of more that we're going to touch on today. Another one is it's a highly specialized and technical trade. As much as there's an art to brewing, and I love that part of it, being able to create that art in the glass. It's also very scientific, very test and learn, very intense around some of the knowledge that you have to be really a craftsman in this industry. And so historically, that information has been passed down through apprenticeships. Or some type of internship program or some type of way like that. So that's not really being exposed to a lot of people outside of a small community. And then lastly, there's really a lack of awareness outside of a small group of people or a small demographic about like what craft beer is. Most people think beer is this monolith that, if you've had one beer, you've had them all. And a lot of people's first introduction to beer is like one of the big bev brands. And they really don't ever have another method to engage to, learn some of the complexity and some of the beauty that exists in the industry. So how do we, as the craft beer industry, break down those barriers and kind of rewrite the perception in people's minds? So, Fenwick, if you want to talk through some of the proposed solutions that you're seeing implemented on the talent side.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I think I'll start by speaking into one of your points, right? Like that the craft beer space is in the minds of many people. And I would agree with you. It is a highly specialized sort of technical trade, at least the brewing aspects of it, right? And I think one of the perhaps misunderstandings that we recognize the need to try to correct is that all there is to the craft brew space is the brewing side, right? That in fact, this is an incredibly diverse industry by way of like employment opportunities, that in order for us to have effective and successful businesses, we need more than just brewers, right? Like I think some of the misconceptions that people might be developing, and especially when we talk about reaching out to communities of color, is again, those perceptions of what craft beer represents and to whom it appeals are misconceptions that we need to break down. And especially when we start thinking about it from a hiring side, recognizing that our talent pools are limited by the extent to which individuals have been exposed to the opportunities that exist for them inside of this industry. And so there have been some really amazing programs that have been developed by some of our partner breweries and colleagues. Specifically, some internship programs have been created, which I think accomplish a couple of things, right? Like you've got to sort of peel back the curtain a little bit, give people a sense of the full range of opportunities that exist for them inside of the company. So whereas in some of my conversations with community members in Athens that I've tried to encourage to come and join our team at Creature, like they're limiting, the couple things that their minds go directly to is, I don't know how to brew beer and I'm not interested in pouring beer. And the conversation that I get to have with them as well, actually, we've got a whole accounting department. We've got a whole creative team. We've got graphic designers. Like we've got an entire lab. So we can start looking at pulling in students from STEM fields. I mean, we've got PhDs on our staff in biochemistry who are working in our labs, whose primary responsibility is to conduct the sort of experiments that many of these students are learning in the chemistry field and the biology field inside laboratory settings, bringing that inside of our space and applying some of that same knowledge to the advancement of quality inside of our industry. And so part of what I think we're trying to help folks to recognize as we're investing in diversifying the talent pool that's coming inside of the craft space is, again, just tearing down that assumption that people have. Like I think the tendency is to sort of like oversimplify what this specific industry represents and what sort of opportunities would exist for people inside of it. And so I know some of those efforts are underway. And again, I think Isaiah spoke to it eloquently, right? Like the issue has been a talent pipeline issue. We are recognizing that, and in particular, as some of the brewery community is stepping forward, especially in the wake of the social uprising underway, right? Like much of which is in response to George Floyd's death. I think there's a little bit of an awakening, and I would say for Creature as well, right? Like there was this moment of deep reflection that our company had to do in the wake of that uprising and in the wake of that sort of community-wide awakening about the extent to which individuals from communities of color were being marginalized and held out of participation in specific ways. And looking at the craft industry, that is something that we've had to sort of reconcile and wrestle with as well. And so again, to Isaiah's point, like breaking down those barriers, that's work that we all have to be doing at every level of the industry. And I think that it applies across industries. This is not specific to our industry. Aside from, and I guess one of the things that I'll lift up as well, and I think, because what I like about having Isaiah and I together on this panel is that like Isaiah's talking about it from like an entrepreneurial perspective, right? Like he, as the CEO and founder of a brewery, working inside of the collective to help prop up other minority-owned breweries and beverage developers, can look at it from the side of the employer, like, or at least like the business development side. I think like Isaiah's perspective is specifically entrepreneurial. I'm looking at it from like the employment side, and like as the VP of talent and culture, ultimately, right? Like I'm in charge of HR at Creature Comforts, and so some of the questions that I'm asking as our company is discussing the intentional steps we can be taking towards achieving some diversity, equity, and inclusion goals inside of our organization are like, aside from recruiting, because I think recruiting is one piece of it, right? Like absolutely, we've got to be proactive. In fact, there was a line, Tiffany, the co-author of the B Corp handbook, right? Like I think the second edition, there was a line in her book that it just like jumped off the page at me, and I wrote it down because I wanted to make sure I mentioned it in here, right? Especially for those folks who are on this call who are thinking about what steps they can take, what can you be doing to try to contribute to this ongoing work inside of your industry and inside of your company. I mean, the statement that she made was that anytime, like, and this is paraphrased, of course, but passivity is like the pathway to homogeneity. Like in the recruiting effort, if all we're doing is posting jobs on the sort of like widely recognized job boards and then waiting for people to apply for those jobs and then staring with confusion at the list of resumes and applicants that we get and wondering why there's not any diversity showing up in that, like the answer to that question is that we are not being proactive enough in reaching out and engaging with communities of color to ensure that they are recognizing the opportunities that exist for them. But I think there's an additional piece that we have to be mindful about. And this is some of the work that we're doing at Creature right now, which is it's not simply good enough to say we're going to go out and recruit a whole bunch of folks from communities of color and try to bring them into our organization. I think there's a little bit of like, to use an agricultural metaphor, like a little bit of like tilling of the soil that has to happen, right? Like you got to be attentive to, because one of the, I mean, Nathan was really helpful in presenting Isaiah and I with some questions that we could think about as we were preparing for this. And one of those questions was, like, we were challenged to speak into how do businesses go about creating a culture that individuals of color want to be a part of? And honestly, I would say my short answer to that is like, well, you can't, right? Like, in as much as I don't think culture is something that gets created for people, culture is something that gets created with people, that the folks that you're hoping that your culture will be appealing to have to be involved in the process of transforming your culture into one that they want to be a part of, as opposed to us sort of paternalistically deciding what we think will be attractive to people who don't look like us and forcing those elements into a manufactured version of their culture and then presenting that and inviting them to come in. I think that's where we start to talk about, like, right, and that's where we get along that progression from diversity to inclusion. It's like inclusion will reinforce and sort of encourage diversity at the point at which people are meaningfully involved in the process of recreating the culture inside of your organization, inside of your industry, such that they will feel the desire to come and be a part of what you're ultimately engaged in. And to get my last point, I think too, just in terms of what we need to be doing to attract communities of color and applicants of color into our organizations, I think that similar to what is now being recognized about what it takes to attract millennials into our businesses, this idea that millennials coming in want to know that they're working for a purpose-driven organization. I think individuals from marginalized communities and from communities of color have perhaps always felt that way, but that need of ours wasn't being recognized or responded to in the way that it is now. And so I think the same changes, the same sort of like revolutions that are happening inside of businesses as they're developing a more purpose-driven mindset, I think those things will not only attract millennials, but will also attract people of color who have like a double bind, right? Like they want to be doing work, but they want to be doing good work that is also potentially improving their quality of life and improving the plight of their communities. And so to the extent to which businesses can recognize the role that they have to play in transforming social structures and addressing injustice, those businesses will be more attractive to individuals of color.
And so to put a pin on that, and lots of great points, and it really highlights the situation of, with Fenwick being an established infrastructure, there are particular situations that he finds himself in that require a different response. Me being external, trying to establish a new business, new infrastructure, there are things foundationally I'm trying to interact to bring about the change, in a different way, but the same goal. So at a high level, what it really looks like to get tactically, representation is important. If you want a more diverse environment, you need more diverse people in there. You need more Black-owned breweries. You need more breweries that are led by women. You need more breweries that are focusing on different styles and different approaches. It's about really how do we decentralize some of the really power and opportunity that has been locked behind access to capital and this very specific knowledge, and then disseminate that to different groups of people so that they can engage and interact and ultimately add their personal, spin on it that for the industry makes it greater as a whole. So, we talk about some of the people doing the work in terms of the talent pipeline. There's a man by the name of Garrett Oliver who started the MJF Foundation, who is actively gathering funds to donate to people of color to attend accredited institutions to get the knowledge required to be able to compete in this specialized field. And so, after that person has the knowledge and that talent pool starts to get more diverse, it's incumbent upon the existing infrastructure to hire from that talent pool, right? So the challenge is now to say, once we have solved the foundational root cause of people are interested because they don't see themselves in this industry. Hello, Black brewer, Black-owned brewery, welcome, see yourself. Now that you get in, you have a chance in infrastructure and support to get educated and exposed to the breadth of opportunity here that just isn't isolated to handling or producing the beer. So then once you're there, being in those spaces that are uniquely your own is a great opportunity, but also having a chance to enter in a space to create that culture alongside with other people, as Fenwick mentioned, is part of the solution, right? So to get tactical for a minute, we need more minority-owned businesses. We need more female-led businesses. We need to actively roll up our sleeves and contribute to creating and curating that talent pool, because one doesn't exist. So, after that's done, we need to create infrastructure to support the growth and development of those people as they continue to contribute to the industry. So those are the takeaways, man. Let's get to work.
Oh my gosh, that was so wonderful. Thank you guys. Thank you for all the work that you guys are doing, and thank you for being here and sharing that with us. So I hope you can hang around a little bit later and network with us. So if you guys have any questions to Fenwick and Isaiah, we can get to those during networking, or if we have any specific questions right now, I don't see any in the chat. Please make sure to add them to the Q&A box too, because it'll be easier to keep track. We have some, for Isaiah, we have one at the bottom. For Isaiah, do you suggest acquiring knowledge of operations, quality, supply, etc. from big corporations before getting involved in B Corps? How has your experience influenced how you grew Creature? So if we can answer that briefly.
Fenwick works at Creature, but what I'll say is the experience around what I've seen and aggregated in working for a lot of these large corporations is the lack of this mindset of business as a force for good. Too often we prioritize profitability and comps and margins and dollars as metrics for success, and we don't look at these softer metrics that are actually more indicative of like long-lasting sustainable change. So, taking that information and the knowledge and experience that I've had by driving success in one arena, I'm trying to really reprogram myself, and then take those skills and then apply them into this model as business as a force for good. The principles are the same in terms of the execution, but the mindset and the intention makes all the difference. So it's about what you focus on, and what gets measured gets rewarded. So we're trying to use a different.
Okay, you guys, thank you so much. So Tiffany Spencer from HBCU Forest in Georgia, if you want to join us right now. The stage is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome. Because my power went out and I'm on my hotspot. So
oh my. It's okay. We're going to get through this.
just wanted to make sure.
Yes, we can hear you well.
Well, hello, I'm Tiffany Spencer. I am a graduate of Bethune-Cookman University, which is a private HBCU in Daytona Beach, Florida. Bethune-Cookman was founded by Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune. Bethune was a renowned educator, advisor to several presidents, and founder of the National Council for Negro Women. So I started my tech career in 2004 working at the Kennedy Space Center, a position I actually learned about when I met a lady from KSC who came to Bethune-Cookman for a career fair. I was actually working the career fair as a member of NCNW, and for whatever reason, she was so impressed with me, she came back and recruited me. And the idea of an individual in a position of power or influence that can come back and provide opportunities for students at a really small school. KSC is about an hour from Bethune-Cookman. That always stuck with me, just to be able to be in a position to provide opportunities for students, especially students at HBCUs. Today, I am the COO of a consulting company called Eastler Consulting Group, and executive director of HBCU Force, which is a nonprofit that partners with HBCUs to implement programs that provide early access to cloud computing careers through exposure to CRM solutions like Salesforce.com. The idea for this program came from, I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for well over 13 years, and there are a number of individuals in this ecosystem who provide training. A lot of the training is geared toward at-risk youth, or I've seen it, just targeted to different communities. There was not an initiative specifically for HBCUs. And I find that sometimes there's a little gap when we are creating diversity programs. We tend to go toward at-risk youth. And I remember being a college student, I was not at risk. I was also not a trust fund baby. And so I also needed opportunities. And I wanted to make sure that that those students were also aware of the career opportunities. And so although I'm talking about Salesforce, you can think about your area, whatever area that is, and think about when you were a college student and how you know, what opportunities you were aware of. The other piece of this program is that I wanted to do something beyond just providing training. There are a lot of initiatives that train individuals, but then when those individuals need to go get positions, they don't have the experience. And so one of the things that I do with HBC Force, well, there's a few things, is that I make sure that the students that I work with have hands-on projects so that when they graduate, they can actually have and put on their resume that they have X amount of years of experience. So my company, eSOR Consulting Group, actually partners with HBCU Force, and we provide internships for the students that have completed this training course. And again, this is an opportunity for students to get hands-on, which is extremely important in helping them to be competitive in the job market. With this program, I do a couple things with the schools. So one, I contact the schools to help them implement the curriculum. My goal is not to and swoop in and say, give me all your students, I have this program, but I really want to partner with the school so that they can understand the technology, the opportunities, and be able to empower them to take what I'm doing and take ownership of it. What I did not want to do is to just come in and provide this service for the school and they didn't know what was going on in it, and they were always relying on me. And so that was very intentional. A lot of the HBCUs and some of the smaller colleges, minority serving institutions, they don't have the bandwidth sometimes to go out and learn about all these different things. Technology is changing so fast, the world is changing so fast, and having companies in their communities, having individuals come there to want to partner with the school, and honestly not just take from the school is really important to me. Another thing that I do with those schools is kind of recognize that the students may not understand the opportunity. If you think back to when you were a college student or even just before you were an adult and think of all the advice that you may have been given, sometimes it does not click. Sometimes you know, you don't realize what someone is telling you until way later. And so a part of what I do when I work with the students in the schools is a bit of branding and marketing to be able to make sure they understand what the opportunity is. And sometimes it can feel like, gosh, they should be appreciative, but they don't know. You know, depending on their background, where they come from, what their parents do, they may not understand. And I didn't want to take offense to that. And so I know going in that I may need to not come in and say, you should be appreciative of this, but help them see the bigger picture. And so I do a number of sessions with the students where I ask them what they're interested in, what do they think they want to do, and slowly show them a path where they can take what they think they're interested in and see maybe something a little bit bigger for them. After they have completed the semester-long course, then this is where we get to where companies like you can make a huge difference. We partner with nonprofit organizations and small businesses. I recruit from nonprofits, small businesses. And essentially what eSOR Consulting Group does with HBCU Force is that we provide internships. So these are like micro internships where students are able to get hands-on experience doing a full implementation project with a nonprofit or a small business. So if I have a small business that needs CRM help, they need a CRM application, I oversee the project, but I have those students actually do all of the work, they use that on their resume. So, for example, I have a student that was a sophomore. He started with my program. Um, it took him about a year to get through everything, but about 6 months in, I had a small consulting company that that hired him. So he was learning and working in his field. When he graduates this next semester, he'll have 2 years of work experience. He'll have a certification, and he'll be able to go into a career almost immediately, right? Just it's so amazing just having a student that has 2 years of relevant job experience and a certification. That is the goal of what we are doing. And so having companies provide internships is is invaluable to these students to be able to get hands-on, get the experience, and prove to employers, prove to themselves, and really understand and get a bigger picture for what they want to do and how they want to impact the world. Internships are also a great way for organizations to increase your brand recognition, increase your community footprint. If you think about reaching out to, there are a number of organizations that focus on serving um, minority serving institutions and organizations that you can reach out to, like the gentleman before me were talking about, in order to increase the diversity of your talent pool. A lot of times we don't think to reach out to the HBCUs. There are 110 of them. There are Each of those schools have organizations. So if if your organization works with accounting, there's a national um, association for Black accountants. Every field has an organization that focuses on diversity that you can partner with to make sure that your jobs, your internships get to these different communities. And all it takes is just a little bit more work, a little bit more Google searching. To be able to identify and reach out to these different institutions and organizations. Internships are a great way, again, to partner with local universities and colleges, again, and reaching out to some of these less known and smaller community colleges and HBCUs. And it's also a great ability to influence your company culture and bring in new perspectives. The idea that the people that you're bringing in should match your company culture, I think is a very interesting concept. Again, knowing that if your company is pretty homogenous, then someone else coming in may not fit that culture, but they can be an addition to your culture. They'll bring in new perspectives, and interns are a great way for that. Anybody that's ever been around high schoolers or college students know that, they are interested and know about things that we are not necessarily privy to or come across every day. And so, but being able to bring those fresh perspectives into your company is certainly a value add. Um, and as mentioned before, so I won't go too much into this, but rethinking, um, as you're wanting to bring in these diverse candidates, things that are important to me, things that I work on with the students that I work with, um, watching your job descriptions, thinking about your onboarding, those are all important pieces to this journey that I work with students on that I think that practically these are things that you can be aware of and things that you can do today. So one, creating an internship program, making sure that you're reviewing your job descriptions for that internship program or other entry level positions to make sure that you are reviewing your wording, where you're posting, the qualifications. Sometimes small businesses kind of have a little bro wording in the job descriptions that's a bit of a turnoff. For some individuals that we do have to be aware of. You want to make sure that when you think about bringing in interns and entry level individuals, that you have a good onboarding program so that people don't get lost in the shuffle, that they don't feel as though they don't fit in because you don't have a process to enter them into your organization. And just thinking that again, if diversity and reaching out to these different communities are important to you, that it does take a little bit of effort on your part, but it's definitely doable. If you are open to having individuals with less experience, or you want interns, or you're looking to diversify your talent pool, but you don't have an internship program, you don't have a way for these individuals to come into your company, then essentially you're putting that burden on someone else. Like, you're not helping your community to train and uplift and mold these individuals. And so I think that it's a very important part to be able to help this community be more competitive. It's a great benefit to your companies, and that is what HBCU Force is doing and eSword Consulting Group is doing.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you. So we do have some questions in the chat, in the Q&A. So I'm starting to realize that there's some questions from previous sessions. So I'm trying to figure out which ones are for this session. But I do see one from Rebecca. It says, how do you move beyond just the higher external perception and staying true to JEDI in your workday, in your everyday work? That's from Rebecca.
Read it one more time.
How do you move beyond just the higher/external perception and staying true to JEDI in your everyday work?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Rebecca, if you want to elaborate a little bit more in the chat by what you mean with this question, we'll come back to you. Okay. Let's see what else we have here. So does Bethune still have its hospitality program?
Yes, it does. It does have this hospitality program. It's actually very well known. A number of its graduates have gone on to very high management positions in different industries and the hotels in the Orlando area. So yes, they do.
Yes, awesome. Then we have another question from Kyle. What tangible practices can B Corps or other organizations implement in order to create space for LGBTQ plus community? How can this be made? How can this be made to be intersectional?
Yeah, so I think it's very interesting. A lot of times, I think companies feel like they have to have everything figured out. They have to have this big, detailed, expansive program before they can roll out something. And I feel like the first step is always reaching out to your employees. Your employees are probably already doing things in these different areas. And so being able to listen to your employees to see what is it that they would like to see I think is always a good area, or reaching out to other organizations that are already doing things to see what has been effective. Sometimes we like to reinvent the wheel, and all the times it's not needed. There are lots of organizations doing these things. Your employees are already doing these things. And so figuring out what your employees want to see and giving them space to bring these ideas to you and give them space to actually lead some of these initiatives, I think.
Wonderful. Okay. I think I see one last question here. Would you agree the best way to build diversity is to recruit in diverse environments and communities?
Yes, I would say so. I think, there are, wherever you post your jobs, whether it's on your website or LinkedIn or Indeed, sometimes we just think that the pool is big enough that people will just see it. And I think it just gets lost there. That if you want to be intentional about increasing your diversity and you see that the applications you get back are not, then yes, then you do have to go take a step further to work with these organizations to make sure that your posting is there, so that you can diversify your applicant pool.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tiffany. It's a pleasure to have you here today with us, and I hope you can hang around as well after so we can network a little bit. And yes, thank you so much. All right, Liz Ott from Threespot in DC. Oh, and by the way, Tiffany, I'm so sorry I got your location wrong. I had Georgia in my document over here, but you are in Florida. So Liz, are you able to join us?
Till next year, then I'll be in Georgia. So
oh, there you go. I'm seeing the future.
Hello,
Let's see.
everyone.
Oh, there she is.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Liz.
Thanks, Mel. Thank you, Tiffany and Isaiah and Fenwick. I wish there was more time for us to have a conversation because it's amazing how much overlap there is between all the industries, and it's helpful to hear what everybody's doing to see where we're all moving in the right direction. For the purposes of brevity, I'm going to stick to the script because I think we are running a little short. But my name is Liz Ott, and I'm the president of Threespot, which is based in Washington, D.C. And for those of you that don't know, Threespot is a digital strategy agency that's built to fight for socially conscious organizations. So our mission is around aiming to interrupt the status quo and reshape how organizations think and talk about themselves. And this plays out in digital strategies and custom user experiences and enlivened brands for a wide range of clients. I started there about 11 years ago, and as a result have seen the agency grow and evolve quite a bit over the years. I've seen us try a lot of things with the best of intentions, and I've seen a lot of things work really successfully. We've always been motivated to leave the world better than how we found it, and caring and fighting for justice and equity is a big part of how we do that. But the events of the past year have certainly made this conversation front and center, and we're not an exception to that. I was promoted to the president. I was leading business development before that, and I was promoted to president in February, which looking at the clock of March 12th-ish being when things started to lock down, it was a couple weeks before full-on lockdown, which was good timing on many levels. But having a Black female president really isn't enough. I think it's been really helpful, but it's been further evidence that this work, the JEDI work, is ongoing and requires involvement by all, and is really forcing us as an organization to re-examine everything from hiring to our core values, and to make sure that we're really practicing what we preach. One of the main areas that I've focused my energy on is one that isn't easily measured by like metrics. It's around creating a safe space and an open conversation internally for employees. We have a lot of socially active and a really progressive team, but that's not enough to me. It's important that we're making space for everybody to speak and everybody to have a voice. And so this encourages people of color and other abilities to speak up. It's creating opportunities for them to step up. It's allowing opportunities for others to listen and increase their own awareness and understanding. And so as a leader, I really try to lead by example and often share my own personal experiences with racism. That helps, I think, to further open up the conversation and really shows the team that it is acceptable to do so. I want us to have those conversations. I know that the conversations aren't always easy, but I think if we're not having hard conversations, then we're not going to be moving forward. So it's for us, it's been this ongoing cycle of listening and responding and adjusting and continuing to listen and evolve. And I want to note that that's something, we're in a lucky position that there is a good amount of representation, but that's not something that can be just owned by minorities. It's something that needs to be owned by everyone. And so I really try to encourage the team to speak in a way that really shows that equity and inclusion is a part of our ongoing values. So to speak more specifically, we have a couple structures in place that help to support that. One being an employee board of advisors that meets regularly with staff. So they each have really built these individual relationships and have one-on-one check-ins with them. Part of the conversation around that is that they're not responsible in reporting anything. It's not that structure. It's really to make sure that they're more on the ground and able to answer and respond to issues or concerns and to really help and support them. But we also do say if you hear of any trends or things that are concerning, that we expect them to raise that to us. And if there was ever anything specific that came up, that it's just a matter of asking permission. Is it okay for me to share this with the leadership, and or encouraging them to speak directly? We also have a monthly town hall that's really informal in nature and allows space for conversation. In addition to, given that it's been a year of remote, a lot of informal spaces like Slack channels and things like that to encourage connection throughout. Another area that I think is really important is investment. We are committed to solving these complex problems for organizations, but by bringing diverse perspectives and voices to the table. But that's easier said than done, which is what I think we're all talking about. And that doesn't come, I continue to reiterate to leadership and to others when I speak about it, that doesn't come without an investment, whether it be financial or time or even emotional in nature. Like, there is an investment involved in getting to where we want to get. And so I would say, if you're at all hesitant to invest in it, that's a big question in terms of how much of a priority it really is, and where you're focusing that within your organization. For us, this plays out in several different ways. So Tiffany just spoke a lot about this, but we have invested in recruiting and hiring. Yes, we've paid to post on a lot of different boards to try to recruit Black tech jobs, diversify tech, people of color in tech, to name a few. We've also updated our language to make sure that it is more neutral. We've included salary ranges to make sure that we're fair in terms of the brackets of experience and the expectations around it. And we've also decreased the experience expectations. One of the things this year that I've worked on is creating a matrix of qualities that we're looking for in employees so that we can rate people a little bit more fairly, where it's more than just culture fit, that idea of, is this person somebody I want to hang out with? We've really eliminated that from even anywhere in our interviewing process, and it's more than just checking boxes on experience. It's trying to get to some of the other things that really matter to us as an organization. We've also invested by providing pro bono work to clients. So we right after the George Floyd incident, we're already doing work with Color of Change and really just invested extra time in doing what we could do to help push the Black Lives Matter movement forward. It was something that was important to all of our staff, and I felt like was a good chance for us to provide our values in a way that is supporting the conversation. And then we've also committed to annual trainings for staff. Most recently, we had a half-day training on asset framing with Trabian Shorters, which if any of you haven't heard of him, you should look him up. He does a lot around, it's helped to move our internal conversation to be a little bit more action-oriented in terms of how we work with clients. So it's focused on reframing conversations to be focused on more of the positive stories and the positive data that actually exists out there to avoid stigmas in communications, which a lot of people use to get people to emotionally attach, but it really does a lot of damage around the actual work that is being done. So that's another thing we've done just to kind of keep things moving. But I just want to reiterate that I really do believe there's no quick and easy solution. There's not one way that works for everyone. And just saying that we've tried, but it's not working is really not enough. And so I know that it won't change. I also say to staff, it's not going to change overnight, but with intentional investment and commitment, you will get there. And so I guess just for me, it's really important to just reiterate that ongoing nature of it. JEDI in action is just that. It's an active state. There's not an end state to it. It needs to be something that we're continuously assessing, continuously evaluating. It needs to be way deeper and more intentional than representation. Well, a lot of my conversations with have been focused on our leadership team and what we're doing. I've also reiterated to the staff that it really takes their engagement, their understanding, and engagement in the process to really feel that progress. Sorry. So yeah, I'm happy to answer any specific questions you may have on what we're doing, and we should connect and keep the conversation going beyond this talk today.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you. Yes, I'm trying to see over here on the chat. Any questions to Liz?
I see Deb asking about the Employee Board of Advisors. Yes, they're senior leaders of the company. We work to make sure that's a diverse team of people, not just of specialty area, but also race and gender and sexuality as well. And we rotate them. So it's a year or two of tenure, and then we're trying to bring new people in to just, one, provide a leadership opportunity for people, but also to try to get different voices in there so it doesn't get too much of the same voice over and over again.
Yeah. So there's a question here from, I'm not sure if it was to you, Liz, or to Tiffany, but let's see. Any advice on reaching out / recruiting from older, diverse communities post-college?
Oof, that's a good one. No, but I will say we saw a lot over this past year just because of unemployment rates, I would guess, of a wide range of in age that have applied for jobs. And I think so this is less recruiting, but the process of like hiring in that, were a lot of conversations I had just with comfort, because I think one of my concerns is wanting to make sure, if we're saying this is a 0 to 3 years of experience, a lot of people will say that they don't care because they just want a job, but that's not also the best, necessarily going to be the best fit. And so it's finding that balance, and I really tried to navigate those conversations. But I would love to hear from some of the other panelists if they have ideas on reaching out and recruiting.
Yeah. It looks like Tiffany added in the chat, reach out to professional organizations from those communities like NSPE or NABA or Urban League. Great. Cool. All right, Liz, I think those were all the questions. Hope you stick around for some networking later.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. All right, Sara Marquez from Greyston Bakery. Are you here? There she is. Awesome.
Sound good?
Yes. All good.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you to all of the other panelists. I've been taking some good notes and learned so much already. So my name is Sara Marquez. I am the director of the Center for Open Hiring at Greyston. Greyston is a social enterprise that creates employment opportunities for those who face barriers to employment through something we call open hiring, which I will share lots more about. A little about me. I joined Greyston about 1.5 years ago to work at the center, and prior to Greyston, similar to Isaiah, I was in much more larger corporate environments. I worked in management consulting, and then worked in corporate strategy in the food and beverage industry. And similarly, I just felt like business had this immense power to be a force for good, and wanted to work on a solution that I thought was helping businesses to accomplish that. And so that's what I do now in talking about open hiring and working with other companies to replicate our model. So a bit about Greyston. Most people have not heard of Greyston, but most have eaten our products. So if you've ever had a pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream that has any sort of brownie in it, that was made by our bakers here at Greyston Bakery. We make all of the brownies that go into Ben & Jerry's flavors, such as chocolate fudge brownie and half baked. We are a commercial baking facility in Southwest Yonkers, so not in the Southeast, but I myself am from DC. So, and we have a pilot of open hiring going on in North Carolina, so I feel a connection to the region. We make about 45,000 pounds of brownies a day. We are a B Corp, and we supply Ben & Jerry's, as I said. We also have single serve that go to Whole Foods as well as some other customers. But the story of Greyston is really not about the brownies, though they do taste good. It's about the people behind the brownies and how we hire them. So as I said, we practice something called open hiring. What that means for our manufacturing jobs, and to give you a sense of scale, we have about 100 people employed at our bakery, of which about 75 came through open hiring. And what that means is for all of our entry-level manufacturing jobs, if you want a job at Greyston, you come to our facility and you put your name on a list. When a job becomes available, and usually we hire in cohorts of about 10 or so, we literally go down the list and we call folks up and we offer them a job. We hire first come, first serve. We do not do background checks. We don't look at resumes. We don't conduct interviews, we don't drug test, we don't do credit checks. Companies spend a lot of money on those expensive screening practices, thinking that they're kind of trying to find the right fit, even for these entry-level hourly jobs. And yet still in many industries, companies face extremely high rates of employee turnover in those roles. And so our perspective is that those screening practices that are so resource intensive don't really serve their intended purpose. Our model is we essentially spend nothing on recruiting for our entry-level jobs. And instead, we invest those resources in doing everything we can to make whoever comes through our doors successful. So what does that look like? We have an onboarding process. We do training, both hard and soft skills. Those things I would say are not like revolutionary. I would call those like good HR. What we also do, which I think is somewhat unique, is that we have a wraparound support model. We call it path making because we're helping folks along their path. But we actually have an on-site case manager, essentially, who works with our employees to address any personal challenges, life challenges outside of work that might impact their ability to be successful on the job. So that could be if they don't have stable housing, or if they're facing transportation issues or childcare issues or substance abuse challenges, mental health issues. She's actually, I say she because right now our employee is a female, but she's actually not our employee. I should clarify. She works for an agency that we partner with. We fund the role, but she's connected to their network of resources. And she, again, helps our employees with these issues, because we think as an employer, it's in our vested interest to help our employees address these issues. Because if you don't have stable housing, it's really tough to come to work on time every day and be your best, most productive self. And I should also say that this is a resource that it's not just for those who come through open hiring. Anyone can go see her, and it's not just entry-level employees that might face issues like that. We all face life challenges that might impact our ability to be successful at work. I will say about open hiring, I think there's a perception that there isn't any accountability and that it's like a nonprofit social service program, but it's really not that. It is, we have a business to run and we have to make money, and not everyone works out. Our path maker, that case manager I mentioned, is there to help and support if someone's having issues and we think we might be able to get them help that can make them successful. But for some, it doesn't work out. And we have a pretty rigorous accountability model in place. We have a point system. And there are folks who are asked to leave. But those for whom it does work out, who are ready and willing and able to work, but who have been denied employment time and time again, they really make incredible employees. And I think every business should want to hire the folks that we have in our bakery. So a little bit about how this started. Greyston was founded in 1982. So it's not a very new concept, open hiring. It was founded by a man named Bernie Glassman, and he was actually a Zen Buddhist monk. And he was baking cakes to make a living, and he saw homeless people on the streets, and he said, society sees these people as liabilities, but I think that they're actually really untapped assets and can create tremendous value if they're brought into the fold and given an opportunity to be productive members of society. And that's exactly what he did. And that's how he started hiring. And that philosophy really still underpins how we do business today. The foundational principle is really non-judgment, that it's not about where you've been or your past. It's the future that matters. And in doing that, we are able to reach the kind of hardest to employ, those who are really excluded from all other employers. So I'm here today not just so you can learn about Greyston and buy our brownies, which you should, because they're delicious and they make great holiday gifts, and there's sales pitches done. But open hiring is something that doesn't just work at this like quirky bakery in Southwest Yonkers. So my role, as I said, I lead the Center for Open Hiring, which was established about 2 years ago with the mission of scaling this model and getting others to replicate it, because there's so much that other employers can learn from this. And we really think that it's just a fundamentally different way of bringing in talent, and it's something that can be replicated. Now, open hiring is not for every job. I often get the question, like, do you recommend doctors being open hired? And no, I would like my doctor to have a certain set of skills and experience. But I do think that every business and every company can think about like what roles exist in your organization for which you could hire the next person through the door. Maybe you don't have, obviously this lends itself well to jobs that can be trained on the job and like manufacturing, distribution. Maybe you're not in that industry, but maybe you have cleaners that come and clean your office facility, or maybe there's a mailroom. And also, even if you're not doing necessarily full open hiring, are there barriers that can be removed at all levels of the organization? Does that job really require a college degree, or do you really need to do the background check? Does that really make your workplace so-called safer? So I've said it, this is a model that doesn't just work at Greyston. We can now actually say that's true because we piloted it with a few other companies, including a couple of B Corps. And I'll tell you just about one pilot that we've run. It's no longer a pilot because they're doing it kind of full stop, but the company is The Body Shop. They are a relatively recent addition to the B Corp community, but were founded in the 1980s, kind of just around the same time that Bernie was getting started with Greyston. They were founded by Anita Roddick, and similarly were very purpose-driven in their initial inception. They were focused on animal testing-free products and cruelty-free, all natural, all of those things. And then over the years kind of got away from their purpose and mission. And in 2017, they were sold to their now owner, Natura. And over the last couple of years have really been on this journey to reclaim their purpose and their mission. And so they restated it as to fight for a fairer and more beautiful world. And each of their functions was kind of trying to figure out, okay, how do we operationalize that? So when their HR teams learned about open hiring, they decided, okay, this is how we're going to make our organization fairer through the practice of open hiring. They have a distribution center outside Raleigh-Durham, and they hire about 200 folks for their holiday seasonal roles. And previously had been requiring high school diplomas, had been drug testing, had been doing background checks. It's actually pretty hard to hire that many people that quickly when you have all of that red tape. So they removed all of that. They went to just 3 questions. Are you authorized to work in the US? We also get that question, do you require I-9s? And yes, we do. So that is the one requirement is being authorized to work in the US. Can you lift up to 25 pounds? And can you stand for up to 8 hours? Because they saw that as those are the basic requirements of the job. If yes, you're next in line for the role. The amazing thing was that they were able to actually bring their turnover down year over year, 60%. And increase their productivity 13%, and also fill roles much more quickly, obviously, through this practice. And the business outcomes are all well and good and compelling. To me, what's kind of most exciting about what happened there is the transformative impact it kind of could have on a culture. And so their supervisors were more engaged, right? Because they really brought them into the fold, got them bought into the model, and suddenly they weren't just like moving boxes around. They were in the business of transforming lives, and I really think that's a compelling element to all of this work and how it can transform a workplace. So I will encourage you all I'll stop there about The Body Shop, but encourage you all to think about, whether there are jobs within your organization for which you could create an on-ramp for someone who is otherwise excluded from the workforce. And just the last thing I'll say is that we have so many challenges to overcome to build more equitable companies, and this work is not easy. But what I will say about open hiring is that it's not easy, but it's not rocket science. And what holds us back sometimes are these entrenched systems and processes, that this perception that hiring people with a background or with no work history is somehow risky. But like, hiring is always a little bit risky. And with turnover rates as high as they are in so many industries, are we really doing the best we can? So I encourage you all to consider trying something different. And I'm here to help if you're interested. So would love to connect with any of you guys who want to learn more.
Thank you, Sara. I mean, change is never easy, right? If you want to see change, you got to put in the hard work. Yes, thank you. I don't see any specific questions for Sara at the moment. If you do have any right now, please make sure to add it in the Q&A box. We have definitely lots of comments for you, Sara. Thank you so much. I'm going to go and buy your brownies right now, right after this session. I sure need some sugar after this. Yes, so wonderful. Thank you so much. So you guys, now we're close to being done, but I do want to play that video from Conscious Capitalism that we were going to play in the beginning, and I encourage you all to stick around. And then we're going to roll right into our final keynotes with Nathan. So I'm just going to leave it up to Nathan. He's going to cue us the video. And thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Mel. And thank you to all those amazing panelists. That was fantastic. When you're putting something together like this, you kind of like envision what this panel looks like. And I didn't want to do a panel, and I didn't necessarily just want to talk about things that I feel like people in this community are already very, very well aware of, that just being a friend, being not a racist wasn't enough. So I wanted to bring people in who are out there being the change. I know I've also, you fight that feeling too of like, as all this happens, like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do everything. There are people out there doing the work right now that need support, that need lifting up, that need doors opened. I put HBCU VC in the chat. You know, there's HBCU Force. There's just so many great organizations. Even the work Fenwick's doing. That's where I feel some of our energy is best spent as allies and as people trying to be the change we want to see in the world. So I just am really happy right now with that panel. Was great, and I hope everybody's a little more inspired after hearing from those wonderful people. So. We are now, Marisa, if you can cue me up the Conscious Capitalism video, because they are one of our platinum sponsors. They're great friends, I think, for most of our organizations. I know in Georgia, we've started going down the path of building this relationship with them. Florida has a long history of working together alongside Conscious Capitalism, since our goals and our mission and so much of our work aligns. So we do want to show that video that Alexander prepared for us. Oh, look at this. It's going to play.
My name is Alexander McCoben, and I'm proud to be CEO of Conscious Capitalism, Inc., a nonprofit organization that supports a global community of business leaders dedicated to elevating humanity through their businesses. We provide business leaders with innovative and inspiring experiences designed to connect you with conscious businesses in the conscious capitalism community and provide insights and tools to help level up your operations and leadership. Collectively, the work of the conscious capitalism movement shows day in and day out that capitalism is a powerful force for good, especially when practiced consciously. Higher purpose is the first tenet of the conscious capitalism philosophy. It is a company's why. Elevating humanity through business begins with knowing why your company exists, especially for a reason beyond just making a profit. It's not that profit is bad, profit is great, but it's a means to achieve a higher purpose to the business. It's not an end in and of itself. The second tenet is stakeholder orientation. A business needs to create value with and for its various stakeholders, finding a win-win-win solution for all. These stakeholders include employees, customers, suppliers, investors, society, the environment, and it may be others that you and your business identifies as key to your operations of groups that you impact. In 2019, just last year, the Business Roundtable released a statement on the purpose of a corporation which embraced this part of the conscious capitalism philosophy wholeheartedly. The third tenet is conscious leadership. Conscious leaders understand and embrace the higher purpose of their business and focus on creating value for and harmonizing the interests of all of their stakeholders. They recognize this integral role of culture and cultivating a conscious culture in their business, really looking to be servant leaders who display the qualities of strength, energy, and enthusiasm, along with long-term orientation, flexibility, and this might be where things get a little different, but love and care, emotional, systematic, and even spiritual intelligence of embodying the values of the company. And the fourth tenet is a conscious culture. This is the ethos, the principles, the practices, the everyday interactions, the underlying fabric of a business which permeates the atmosphere of the company, connecting all the stakeholders to each other and to the purpose, people, and processes that comprise the company. Now, it's important to realize what conscious capitalism is not as well. Conscious capitalism is not a call for you to sacrifice your profits or growth for the sake of doing good. We see them as integrally related to each other and dependent on each other. It's not the idea that you need to apologize for being in business. We believe business is fundamentally good, ethical, noble, and heroic. It's not a checklist of things to do, but rather it's a business strategy to weave into the DNA of your company at all levels. It's not a reflection of any political stance. This is apolitical and in many ways transpolitical. This is a unifying force that people can agree on and work together to make a better world with. It's not a marketing strategy or tool. It's not a form of corporate social responsibility that you tack on after everything else you do. And it's not a business strategy owned by the CEO alone or any individual in a company. It's something that to really succeed and propel the business forward needs to be embraced and practiced by every member of the organization and permeate throughout everything a company does.